Hello everyone, Sebastiano here of CodyHouse.co. Okay, so in this quick video, we're going to take a look at how to use the colors of the CodyHouse framework. We are looking at the colors.scss file of our framework. As you can see right here, we have a list of colors stored into CSS variables. We are using the HSL color value to define these colors. HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. And the reason why we are using this color value is because it makes really easy to generate color variations and understand what's happening with your colors. For example, if we look at color primary and color primary dark, we can see immediately that primary dark is obtained by reducing the saturation to 80% and the lightness to 48%. Okay, so the colors can be organized, are organized in 5 groups. Main colors. Think of main colors as the brand colors, for example, the color used for the buttons and the links. Then we have black and white, which represent the only exception to the semantic rule that we're using for all the other colors. There is a reason for that, which I'm going to explain later in this video. Then we have the feedback colors, which are the colors associated with feedback components, like for example, alerts and the notifications. So we have color success, color error, and color warning, which are usually associated with green, red, and yellow. Then we have color contrasts. So this is a very interesting part. I'm going to give you more details about how color contrasts work later in the video. Just think of them as the neutrals, the shades used for elements like borders and light backgrounds. Finally, we have semantic colors. These are the colors you want to store into a variable just because it's useful. For example, color border, which is the only example we are providing in the framework. You can add more if you need. You don't want to go, very often into the colors file to check which shade of gray you're using for the border. You can just store the value into a CSS variable, and when you need to use the variable, you can just set, for example, background color equal to color border. That's why. So that's the goal of the semantic colors. There is some more stuff here which is used to enable the theming. And so the most interesting part of the colors in our framework is about themes. The CodyHouse framework is set up in a way so that it's really easy to create a theme and apply a theme to a component. Now, a theme is just a collection of colors which depend on a background color. So let me show you an example. If we check CodyHouse.co, this one could be considered a component. So text on one side and a media on the other side. Because the background is white, we have to set the colors of all the other elements, so text, buttons, the images as well, in a way so that they are visible given that background color. Right, if we check this component here, which is basically the same component, we have text on the right this time, and the image is on the left. Now the elements, they are very light, so we can look at the text, for example, and the image as well, because the background is dark. So given the background, we have to define the color contrasts, which are the colors of the elements of the component, let's say. If we go back and check the part about color contrast, you can see right here that we define a color background, which is the color of the component, and then we have color contrast higher, which is a color which should be really easy to see given that background. So for example, if this is white, this could be black, and then all these colors here are intermediate values of the color contrast higher. So we can think of these values as shades of the color contrast higher. Now, what's the meaning of these values though? So into our documentation, we suggest some examples that you can keep in mind when you apply these colors to elements of components. So for example, the color background is obviously the background color of the component. Then we have color contrast lower, which is a low contrast background. Then we have color contrast low, borders, color contrast medium, so it's the color to be used for subtle text. Think, for example, about placeholders in input fields. Then we have color contrast high, text color, and then we have the highest of the contrast, color contrast higher, used, for example, for text heading colors. So why is this method useful? So how can this method make your life easier as a developer? Well, that's because when we define these colors, usually we call them grayscale colors, right? Because we think very often of our theme as a light theme or a dark theme. And then we know that in both cases we can have different shades of gray as the neutrals, let's say. But what if you have a blue component, a component with a blue background? So in this case, if you want to apply a color to a border, probably this color is not going to be a shade of gray, it's going to be a shade of blue. So that's why we invite you to think of the neutrals as contrast colors, not really grayscale colors. So instead of using gray 1, gray 2, gray 3, and so on, we want you to use color contrast values. And if we look at this approach in practice, so we have an example here on the CodePen. Now, okay, this is just a very simple component. Now, I have applied to the element color contrast values. So color contrast higher, color contrast high. For the borders, I'm using a color contrast low, and so on. Now, if, first of all, to apply a theme, we can just use data types. So data theme equal to default. So you don't really need to apply the default theme because it's applied by default. But we, if you go back here for a second, we do specify the values of the default theme just because you may be applying a theme to a component, which is, for example, a dark theme. And then maybe you want to apply the default theme to a child component, to a component within the component with the dark theme. So that's why it's handy to have the information about the default theme stored somewhere, because you may need to apply this theme. Okay, so if we change this value from default to dark, as you can see, so everything has changed. Now, if we take a look at the code, right, so right here is where we define the new theme, data theme dark. So all you have to do is just picking some of the colors you want to change and change their value. And then obviously you want to change the color contrast, and that's why color contrasts are very, very important. So as you can see right here, now that the color background is dark, the color contrast higher is white. It's no longer black, but it's white, obviously. And then all the intermediate values are now shades of white. So I didn't change a single thing in the component. So the value of this, the color value of this element here is still color contrast higher. Same goes for the text, for the borders, and anything else. The only change is this one, is this bit of code right here, the data theme, which then can be applied to the component. To give you another example, so this is one of our tools, the color global editor. Yeah, so in building the editor here, I've used the same approach. So I've created, for example, a data theme dark, just in case. So if you take a look, if we select the sidebar here and we edit this element, if I apply a data theme of dark. There you go. So you can see right here, all the elements have changed. The color primary is different, and all the background obviously is dark, and all the content, the color of the content changed accordingly. Just because I created a data theme dark where I redefined the values of the color variables. So that's really easy, but at the same time is really, really powerful. So you just have to make sure that when you are creating elements within your components, you are using the color contrast values. You're applying the color contrast values to these elements. Okay, so one final note before we end this video. We said before that color white and color black represent an exception to this semantic rule and in general to the theming approach. And there is a reason for that, because white and black are colors in our framework that you don't want to change when the theme change. So they have to be the same regardless of the theme applied to the component. If we take as example this one, so if we take a look at the button primer here. So as you can see here, the color is equal to color white. So if we go back to the default theme, instead of color white, I could write color background, because now we know that this is white when the theme applied to the component is the default one. What if I change this value to dark? Okay, as you can see now, the label of the button has turned black. So it's obvious because we know that the theme has changed and the value of the color background is no longer white. Now it's a dark color, it's close to being black. So this is one of those cases where I want the label to remain white. Because I know that the background color of the button is going to change, but I still want the label to be white. So I'm going to use, in this case, color white as opposed to color background. So just a general rule to keep in mind, when you want a color to change with the theme, you should use the color contrast values. While if you want a black or a white color or any other color you can define in your colors.scss file, if you want a color to remain the same regardless of the theme, you should use color white and color black, and so on. Okay, so that's all for the colors in our framework. I hope you enjoyed the video and thanks for watching.